Welcome to the Operating Discipline Podcast. This is a conversation for leaders who are willing to take a hard look at how they actually operate, beyond the plans, beyond the strategy, and into execution. We want to have real world conversation about where execution holds and where it doesn't, and what leaders actually have to do to move the business forward. Our conversation today is with Peter Smith, who is the CEO of Translate.One, a $25 million company in the global communications space. And our topic today is global acquisition and integration. I'm really excited, Peter, to talk to you. Welcome. And my first question to you really is, what is going on in your organization? What's going on in your world?
Okay, well, thanks, Terry, and thanks for having me. I think there's two significant areas, and one of them is really external to our organization. And as everybody else, I think, is experiencing the impact of AI. And in our business, we provide global communications, a lot of it centered around the provision of languages, services, and technology. And AI is transforming that element of the space. Everybody knows that it's a pretty significant contributor to being able to translate content, and is vastly used for that now. And then the other thing is that we have grown significantly, and we have grown mostly through acquisition. And so being acquisitive and onboarding several new organizations brings a lot of challenges, and the rationale behind it is to be able to add scale and synergies. And so that's what we look to achieve from the acquisitions. And of course, that's where a lot of my work is involved.
That's a lot in a short period of time. So what are some challenges that you're facing? Some things that you have to navigate?
So amongst a few challenges, one is that in our industry, you get people who are very dedicated, have studied and worked for a long time to get to where they are. So a lot of our teams have degrees, masters, PhDs in linguistics, in language-related business, and have spent many, many years honing those skills and ensuring that we provide a quality output. And now AI comes along and provides a degree of quality in its output, but there are many challenges behind getting that to where it needs to be. We work in a variety of sectors, from areas with very high criticality of content, so regulated industries, pharma, medical devices, health service, legal. And we're now finding that our teams have now got to balance that attention to detail, that attention to quality, with the positioning of AI and the global customer expectations of what AI will bring. And so there's a lot of transformation within the business, aside from the transformation that these people are also experiencing being acquired by a new organization as well.
I don't even know where to start with that, Peter. There's so much in there. When you're talking about AI, everybody's talking about it now. Everybody's trying to figure it out. How do you think that is impacting your business? I mean, what are some of the challenges that you face?
So one interesting element is that previously, if we used to get any quality considerations, clients would often say, "Hey, have you been using Google Translate?" So it was a negative.
Yes.
And now there's a great expectation that, the entire cycle of language supply uses automation, uses AI. And so, we now have the, we now have to integrate AI into workflows, into customer workflows, being able to manage the difference in quality considerations. Because as I say, if you've got critical content, you've got content where a mistake can be hugely impactful, that's treated very differently to if you've got an email that needs translating. I mean, we have subsidiaries around the globe. I receive emails in a variety of languages. I have a little button, it click and gives me a translation. Good enough for those purposes. However, the quality that I get from that, I would not really want to, for example, rely on that for global branding positioning to see that that level of quality was out on a Japanese website trying to sell my products in competitive with competing with local products, for example. I wouldn't want it in some sort of medical device translation where just a error could be very significant. So there's a great deal of quality considerations and speed and time that comes into that. And so that's providing not only our company, but our whole industry with challenges being able to adapt and adjust and still provide the right level of service and customer support that's needed.
It's interesting, as you said, there's a level of responsibility that you have in your translation. AI is great, it's wonderful, it's here, but you have to ensure that you maintain the quality that you're known for. And as you're doing that, I don't know, uh, do your clients have huge expectations of how AI is going to affect the services they get from you?
Yes, but of course, AI is relatively new to everybody. And of course, it's quite easy to be able to see its value in lots of circumstances. But with anything that's new, it's the implementation of it. It's the way it's set up, structured, managed that either creates the right output or or otherwise. Um, and so I think what everybody knows is it's quick. Obviously, if you can get AI to work way quicker than humans can, and accordingly, it's very cost effective as a result of that. And it's sort of relentless. It doesn't need to sleep. It doesn't need food. It's there
Yeah.
all the time. So it creates those sorts of expectations. And as an organization who ultimately we're talking about communication, we're talking about what is specific or unique to humans it's verbal language communication. And of course, AI is replicating that to a degree, but not all languages are the same. So when they're building the AI models, for example, Spanish has a huge amount of content, same as English does. But if
Yes.
you've got some African languages or variants of Middle Eastern languages, there's very little content out there, and so the the output you get from those languages is going to be lower than quality, lower than for Spanish, for example. And so, and then again, you've got the obviously the content itself and the criticality of that content. So even though it adds significant benefit, it changes things rather than removes things. So we still need humans to ensure that we have the right workflows, that the right content is getting treated in the right way, that we're adapting for the different nuances of languages. And we also deliver it in speech as well. We do multimedia, we provide interpretation services. And, in all those circumstances, there's different treatment needed to provide the right output. So AI is a great contributor, but it's just one element to ensure that you're providing the right level of service.
And thank you for sharing that because I think where I was going was there's a level of responsibility with AI that we have, and you just explained that. It's we can't turn everything over to AI, but it can help us achieve our goals. And so I think that's really important. And the reason I asked about managing expectations is it is happening really fast and people are moving really fast. But I think from an operating discipline standpoint, we need to ensure that we have the systems and processes in place so that we manage this very responsibly. And
Yes,
that's honestly what I'm hearing from you. You're working to be responsible for how AI comes into your organization and how you leverage it to deliver for your clients.
correct. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. The second area you mentioned was you're growing by acquisition, correct? And so tell me about some challenges about acquiring different businesses in different countries and bringing them together.
So, so the rationale behind acquisitions is that, um, again, in our business, you're reliant on scale because organizations that typically need our services, which is content provision and language provision, um, it's all about global communication. So we need to be able to provide the right resources at the right place, at the right time, with the right skills, with the right language knowledge. And so to do that, you clearly need some scalability, and it needs to be a global scalability. So we're headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, um, but we have made a number of acquisitions and in a variety of countries. And so we now have people from the US, South America, right across Europe and out to Asia. And the other rationale behind the acquisitions is that we need to provide a broad range of services and technology to fulfill our goal of being able to service organizations regardless of the requirements. So we're onboarding companies with that have maybe our specific technologies, specific expertise. Could be an interpretation company, could be a technical authoring company, a technical translation company, etc. And then using that newly acquired expertise or technology to then be able to offer those services to our existing clients and also the other way around. So when we buy the organizations, we're looking to integrate them into what is now a global organization. And so there's a lot of change management and change for those employees. A lot of them are very long standing, been working for a very long time in this organization, very familiar with the culture, with the practices, the processes. And, clearly we come in and and have to make sure that we retain what made them good in the first place, what made us want to acquire them, but be able to utilize and expand that across our entire portfolio. And so there's a lot of change management. There's a lot of changes that the employees need to go through. Um, and so I guess that's where a lot of our effort and energies are spent on doing that. And one way that we've seen that's very, very helpful for doing that, and maintains the quality and the synergy with growth, is to create centralized um, centers of expertise, if you will. So whether it's around quality, um, or the vendor management, or training. And so we have taken people from the acquired organizations and created these central groups. That means that each individual subsidiary does not necessarily have to adopt all the right levels of expertise. They can go to these centralized areas. And of course, because they've come from the acquired organizations, they have inherited some of the practices, the skills, etc., that were in those companies. So we found that's been key to be able to grow and to be able to grow effectively and maintain, I say, the what made the companies great in the first place, be able to expand that across the.
That's interesting with that centralized model. I am making an assumption that there were challenges in that. what were some of the challenges in starting to centralize as you acquire new businesses?
So one of the key challenges, of course, is the companies that we acquired are mostly very long-standing companies. I think one of them had been going 40 years, a couple of them 25. And so, and they had employees who had been there for a number of years. And so they're very familiar with how it works. They understand their job, they understood position. And when you then become part of a larger organization and one that's integrating its offerings, then you're often having to step a bit outside of where your comfort zone, what you've been comfortable with. And even though we have a lot of great employees, doesn't necessarily mean that they're great at adapting, and people adapt at different ways, different speeds, etc. And so being able to have these centralized groups helps with that, but it's still a challenge to get people to understand that again, if they've been working in an office and they've been with their team members and very familiar with it all, to now know that they're working with people in other countries or they've never met, they're just they're now seeing them on Zoom, etc. And it takes time to be able to be comfortable with people. The the way that they communicate, organizations have different methods and processes for communication and distribution of information, and we've had to adjust and adapt to that as well. So, so that people can understand where they go, for whatever and how it will all work. So the centralized groups help with that, but also we've put together quite a degree of documentation as well, because within these organizations, what we found was that some are well documented, some are not. Some of the sort of the cultural elements are there, but they're not overt, and they're not instantly identifiable, but they all exist. And so we've tried to create centralized documentation that is consistent, that is easily accessible, that is maintained well, so that when people have questions where they don't know where to go, where they don't, whatever it may be, they can go to this centralized repository and be able to at least, probably their questions are being asked by other people as well. So again, it's more centralization, but it's centralizing what exists around all the organizations. And again, we found that that's been really useful in people feeling part of the organization quicker than they would have possibly otherwise.
Now, it's really good when you can have that documentation and that source for people to look at. Peter, how do you know when it's working and how do you know when it's not when you acquire a new company?
Um, that's uh, a good question. Um, I think you will always know at some point it's not working. I guess the skill is identifying it quick enough that it's not being too impactful. And so I think we have a very good management team outside of myself, and so we've got some very good people being managing and implementing the process, and so they have created a good structure and a good infrastructure, and there's good checks and balances in there. So we very quickly can identify when there's any failings. We are ISO certified. We have about 6 ISO certifications, so we have a lot of oversight as well in that way. So we can pick up very quickly if we see any decrease in quality, for example. And so that would be an indication that there's something wrong, and we're able to get that quickly. From a people perspective, I think that one thing that I think I realize that you do have to be patient, and that people adapt at different speeds and also react differently to different things as well. So you have to be consistent with your messaging. I heard somebody relay it as you have to set the course. So 20 degrees north, 30 knots, whatever, and maintain that. So the consistency in communication and the messaging is vital. And then you can see whether people are picking that up or relating to it or not relating to it. We have, monthly um, worldwide company calls as well as the regular department the calls that people would have as well. So I think the communication is key. And then, of course, obviously, you see probably a bit late at this point, but if you've got a retention issue, you're probably not doing things well because obviously retention is key as well. And the acquisition is all around people, and we're wanting to create career paths for the people at the newly acquired organizations. And um, and so we're very keen that people feel part of it and, and want to develop their career. And we're reliant on people. I think what's undervalued is people who can adapt because particularly in our environment, it's constant change with new organizations joining the group, constant change with technologies. Because we're primarily a service business, constant change with the way that our customer base has changed as well. So retention is key as well. So we do a lot in motivation, I guess, for employees to make sure that the retention's there as well.
And globally, you said you have a little over 100 employees.
Yeah, we have probably that in full-time employees, but then we use a lot of contractors in our industry as well. So at any time, there's a few hundred or thousand people contributing to the projects.
And Peter, as you were explaining that and just, having like communication being consistent, I keep hearing you have a strong operating discipline. That's why I asked the question, how do you know it's working and, and how do you know it's not? And what do you do? And so it for me, I'm always listening to how quickly do we identify things that are wrong? And then how do we come together to correct them? And those things hopefully are not repeated because if they are repeated, that means there's something in our processes that's missing. And so have you had to do any work in that area? I mean, how did you get to this place where we are comfortable with how we acquire companies, how we bring them on, how we integrate them? How did you get to that place?
Well, I think um, from a starting point, you have to have a strategy. You have to know where you want to go and be able to analyze what you believe will take you there. And in our case, as I said, a lot of the motivation is being able to have scale and broadness of offering, as well as the geographic base as well. And then I think from that point, you obviously we always go through due diligence with the organizations and you're trying to assess that there's a good cultural fit and that you have the right skills and et cetera in place. And then you provide the structure and the infrastructure to allow those organizations to fit effectively into the broader group. And so I said that the centralization has been key to that. Um, Technology is key as well. We use sort of technology as an infrastructure, and we develop our own technologies. We use third parties, of course, but we also develop technology, and we have a group that contributes to that to ensure that we're fully encompassing everything that's needed. And so I think that integrating the organizations in and trying to do that as quickly, though being and effectively as possible, allows. I think the other thing you have to create a culture and allow people to sort of be honest, because if people are not going to tell you what's wrong if they think they're going to be blamed for it. So
Absolutely.
I think that's key as well. Um, and that people, identify themselves. It seems much nearer to, to knowing me, for example, about what's wrong. And the same, that's where it comes down to also, we have people who have not only studied our business, but worked in it for many, many years. And so the really great people can contribute an awful lot, but they have to adapt. They've got to be adaptable now because the world changes so quickly, and so we focus on that element as well.
I'm hearing so many aspects of operating discipline. And, I think about acquisitions that I've been part of. And one in particular, I just remember we had to find a way to make it a win-win for everyone. So you need to be mindful and respectful of what that organization has accomplished on their own and then what we can accomplish together. And it was an ongoing process to create something new together instead of just having two separate organizations that are working in the same space.
Yeah, that's, yeah, absolutely. And I guess you said it better than I had been. Um, that that's entirely almost entirely. There's two entirely bases for the acquisitions. Is one, to be able to uh, recruit very good people very quickly and effectively. And that's what you get by the acquisitions. And then being able to get the synergies that the end result is greater than the constituent parts. And of course, to do that, you have to mesh them effectively together. And hence, that's why you have to respect the value, the contribution of the individual companies and the people within them. And then that's why I say about talking why we develop technologies as well, because then we can incorporate and encompass the components of the different organizations. One example, we acquired a company, actually in the UK, who have a interpretation platform. So it's a very effective platform for people who need an interpreter. Doesn't whether it's an immediate need or a pre-booked need, or whether it's on-site, face-to-face, video, whatever it might be. Um, and so they're in the UK. Their customer base is primarily in the UK, but we can utilize that in other areas of our business and in other places as well. And so, but to do that, we need to incorporate some of the other components that the other companies needed. So we now develop that platform to incorporate other elements of other acquired companies. And of course, we need their skills and their input and impact to create that. So then at the end of that, or at a stage, you've then got a product which encompasses the two companies, even though the originating one was the initial developer of it. It's now not just their platform; it's it's the company's platform, and everybody had that involvement in, and it's added services that were not there at first, and we're creating that synergy. We're creating an improved platform, and we've had people working together in the development of it. So, and that goes across the other offerings we have in other different business streams.
I really again, it's a fascinating conversation. You have a fascinating business. And as I said before we actually started recording this, you make it sound easy. And I know it's not easy. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of discipline. And you have to pivot from time to time to make sure you stay on course. So, if you can leave us with three key pieces of advice for companies going through a global acquisition and integration, what would that be?
Um, One, I would not. Um, I think, as I said earlier, appreciating and respecting that people may be excellent at their job, but acquisition and the world today requires people to adapt. And I think that understanding that people take different time and different methods and means to do that is key as well. Because also, when you look into the future, the people who are maybe the higher performers in the past may not necessarily be in the new business, and vice versa. There's people who can really um, elevate their ability through the change and adaptation. So I think that that's key to understand, that you're going to have changes with people, and some of them are at different speeds, etc. Don't underestimate technology, because one of the when you say make it look easy, what of it is, that is easy comes from us having some great people. But one area that I would not say that is easy or is the technology integration. When you acquire organizations, clearly they've got some technology being used. They may have developed it themselves, it may be third party, maybe a combination. The next company will have a different array, and then the next one will have a different array. And when you're looking to create synergies and an integrated organization, you have to try and integrate those technologies so that people can work across the enterprise. That is not insignificant. And so I would say that anybody doing what we've done, pay great attention to how you're going to integrate those technologies, both from a people perspective, people having to use them, adapt to them, being trained in new technologies. How, if you're a service business like we are, how you're going to move your customers from one platform to another. How you're going to support, maintain, manage that when you're going overseas. You have GDPR and different regulations in different countries, which is another thing I actually didn't touch on, but different countries have different regulations. They have different laws, different human resource laws, and so the legal aspect of it is also key. So your technology, though, is probably the biggest, I would say, consideration, because it's so significant to achieve, but it's such a it's so key to the infrastructure of your business that's really.
Is there a third point, or because I have a comment on the second point, the technology?
Um, and then I think I think the third point is just around the differences in countries as well, because there's different employment laws, but there are different cultures, and there are ways that language barriers, you've got time zones. So, for example, we have people in the Philippines. I couldn't even tell you what, it's like 12 or 13 hours difference.
Yeah.
So I would say that those, people might think they're obvious, and, it is obvious. You can, to know that different countries are in a different time zone, but what that actually means when you're going to be communicating, how it's going to change your workflows, how it's going to change your support, and all those areas. So I would say that's important as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you, because those are like three key pieces. And I wanted to just comment on the technology piece. You said it so eloquently. Um, I think there's a huge opportunity before you even acquire a company, and you probably do this in due diligence. Just what is their technology, and what will it take for us to to integrate those pieces? And that should probably be a part of your decision making on the business. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's definitely a fair statement. And yes, I mean, yes, it's there in the due diligence, one of a number of areas, of course. But when you're talking about technology, you know, there are so many technologies, and there's third party ones, but also, at least where we are, the companies we're acquiring have typically developed their own to some degree
Yes.
as well. And you know, you need to see how that's been developed, how well it's documented, whether it's using current technologies, whether it has third-party plugins. There's a whole variety of things around, you know, around that piece as well. And then even without thinking how you're going to be able to use it across the enterprise and use it in with other organizations, and you know, what the way that they've been used to working, the workflows that they've been used to having, do they fit with the technology? And so, yeah, it's a big area. Due diligence, absolutely. Though I'm not sure, and at least I've not been able to get to a place where you can be, you know, confident that you've got everything covered. And so there's going to be surprises for sure.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, I don't know how you pull everything together, but the bottom line is if you have a solid foundation of how you go about operating your business and you're consistent with that, you've said that several times, you're consistent, then as you encounter these challenges like AI, we're filtering it through our system, we're adapting our system, but we are working our system to deliver the results that we want. And so that's really what we're talking about in operating discipline is how do we operate on a consistent basis so that we get the performance that we want. And so when there's a gap between here's our strategy because you did an amazing job of sharing what your strategy is. When there's a gap between strategy and execution, there's a ton of opportunity to figure out why. And you can't ignore that because that gap will determine what your performance is.
Yeah,
If you
absolutely.
close that gap, you've got a greater shot at getting the performance that you want. And because you're doing global acquisitions, great strategy, but if the execution isn't there, the strategy is not going to be accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you said it very well. And yet, of course, you have your strategy. You have to be consistent. You have to ensure that everybody knows that. Like the whatever it was, 19 degrees north, 25 knots, and that needs to be a consistent messaging. But
And
then, of course, yeah, it has to. The people have to understand their roles, their position, where they go for information, what the processes, the workflows, and we do it through centralization, through documentation, through a training department, through technology. But absolutely, there's no point having a great strategy if you have poor execution. So it's obviously key to try and link the two. And I say, and the other thing I think that I discovered is that you have to be patient as well. You can't. I mean, you may even see that something's not working, but you can't have a knee jerk reaction because it takes time for people. It takes time to adopt and adapt to the new environment, and so you have to be able to know when it's something symptomatic or systematic, and you need to change it, or whether it's just something that needs writing, needs attention because it's an integration challenge rather than a systematic or symptomatic failure.
yeah, thank you for bringing that back because I think that's that you mentioned that earlier on, and I thought that was really important because I don't hear many people talk about patience, and you did. And I think that's so important because that goes back to the expectations. If we think we're going to acquire a company, get them in, get them all settled and just keep moving, it's rarely like that. So, can we demonstrate patience in all the places where we have to while continuing to move things forward in a very disciplined way? Um, is so important that patience is not tolerance. That patience is getting everyone in the same place, getting systems in place, getting our processes in place so that we can go forward together. And so when I think about operating discipline, I've heard so many different aspects in what you shared. And in order for you to be successful in acquiring these businesses, you have to demonstrate operating discipline.
For
You
sure.
you absolutely have to.
Absolutely.
So, Peter, is
Absolutely.
there anything else as we close this episode? Is there anything else you'd like for us to know, or would you like to share?
Um, no, I don't think so. I think, hopefully as you say, there's a lot of complexity and there's a lot of moving parts, not only because we're constantly evolving through adding new organizations, but we are heavily impacted and influenced by the outside world. And, there's always something, but AI is obviously a significant change. It's not, we've gone through a lot of changes within the industry, but this is a huge one. And so that's creating a need for to adapt as well. And so I guess, at the moment, um, both internally through the growing organization, externally through the impact of AI, it's interesting times. But no, I think I covered on what I believe are the main points. Thank you.
No, thank you for bringing the AI piece back in because I'm like, that's just everywhere, right?
Yeah.
That's we're
Yeah.
all dealing with that. So, thank you. I really appreciate the conversation, and I continue to be intrigued by, what I'm hearing and how you're going about acquiring companies. And honestly, Peter, it's the care that you're giving to those acquisitions. So, if this conversation has challenged your thinking, please pay attention to that. Operating discipline isn't a systems issue, it's a leadership issue. If you're seeing gaps between strategy and execution, that gap doesn't close on its own. Thank you for joining. I'm Terry Wilson.